Yogaha Karmasu Kaushalam.
Hello, my dear colleagues. Welcome to all of you in today's presentation on nutrition, environment, and genetics. I am myself Dr. Kait Johar. I am Associate Professor in the Department of Zoology at Gujarat University, Ahmedabad. So, I am dealing with a very important topic on the nutrition and environment and how it affects our health, you know, with a perspective of its effect on the genetics. So let us start with this cartoon. It's a very important cartoon. If you can see over here carefully, it gives us message that, you know, the food items that we use today, like the Coke and Pepsi, these are even more harmful than the guns. That's why this guy says, "Oh, thank heavens, I thought it was a Coke or a Pepsi can." So, so with that importance that you understand, let us start with our, perspective. So our wellness is determined by six, dimensions. So it's social, occupational or environmental, spiritual, physical, intellectual, and emotional. So all these six components, they affect our wellness. Now, and on the other side, if you see the modern diseases and the casualty which is there in the modern diseases, so then, you will come to know that, one of the most important factor which plays a role in the casualty is food and the environment. So this also reflected in this graph which I have taken from one publication. So if you see that most of our diseases are diet related. Okay, so it is estimated by a recent study in the Lancet that more than 60 to 70% of our diseases are either due to diet or due to environmental effects. So one more cartoon giving us a very nice message. Lot of research at present is being done that, contradicts themselves. Someone will say that drinking a tea is good, and some other will say no, drinking tea is not good. Someone will say drinking red wine is good, and someone will say that drinking even a single pack of any type of alcohol is bad. So that's why there is a lot of confusion in the mind of a common people, and they are just lurking around what to do about our food, and then they try taking whatsoever the food and say, oh, I don't have any kind of effect. Now the importance of food in our health goes back to more than 2500 years, where Hippocrates said that let thy food be thy medicine and thy medicine be thy. And we used to say this in our Indian culture also. Our Ayurveda and the ancient knowledge have given us a lot of information about what to eat, when not to eat. So if we follow these different types of instructions which are given, then that will make our life much better. Why? Because 5 of the 10 leading causes of death of Americans are related to dietary habits. Means almost half. It's half. But there is no such data for the Indians. But there are some data for the Southeast Asia. At least 80% of the premature heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, and even more than 40% of the cancers can be prevented only by using diet or good diet, physical exercises, and by avoiding the tobacco. In the Southeast Asia region, 2% of annual reduction in death due to chronic disease could save more than 8 million lives in the coming 10 years. In India, a similar reduction is expected to happen, and that can give us an economic gain of more than $15 billion. So that's a very important data. So let us understand more about the Western India and our dietary habits. So Western India, where our Gujarat is located, so we know that most of our people is vegetarian, where there are a lot of consensus and they say a lot of different aspects, but you may say that majority of our people are vegetarian. Even if they are eating non-veg, they are not eating at such amount that they can be classified under what is called non-vegetarian. We have a very high environmental radiation. We do have a smoke and pollution also, and many of our people, they use tobacco in a different forms, and we have our people residing in both urban rural environment, because these are important, where they are staying. So food are of various types, and you may say them that they are bioactive food if they are doing something in our body. As for example, certain food are very important for digestion. Some other foods are very important for cellular energetic, some other for hormonal homeostasis, inflammation, immunity, differentiation, apoptosis, DNA repair, compound activation, cellular division, etc. etc. Now, in this regard, I want to emphasize that in Ayurveda, a lot of property for each and every food is written. Those property cannot be directly translated in these terms, but yes, they may have a similar kind of effects. Rather than that, I want to tell you very clearly that before 4,500 to 5,000 years, we have classified the food based on its activity and its effect on our body. So rather, we should be using that knowledge also. Now, but what about the modern science? So in the modern science, we can learn about the effect of food with the help of various types of omics. Okay, so these days in the research are days of the omics. So people wants to know about omics. Omics means at a very larger perspective. Okay, so you may say nutrigenomics means talking about nutrition and genetics at a whole level, then it becomes the genomics, epigenomics, transcriptomics, proteomics, okay, lipidomics, metabolomics, like that. There are several omics, okay, and our food have definitely have an effect at all these different levels. So one more cartoon, very important. Doctors don't agree yet, but 4 out of 5 mice recommended this stuff. So this is a one scientist is saying to his, you know, colleague or his student. So the question is this, that can the study which is performed on the mice be translated to the human? So that is really a very complex question, okay? Because there are lot of different components in our food and they can have a varied effect also. We have a several essential nutrients and we have a several non-essential nutrients also, that we say non-essential into the inverted comma, because into the inverted comma, okay, because we really yet don't understand their function, okay. Lot of epidemiological studies which is performed in different countries, I'm talking about the countries which are developed, they suggest that these all different components, they impart health to us, but science still cannot explain exactly what are their functions in our body. So these include lots of phytochemicals, zoochemicals, so chemicals which are coming from fungi, which is called fungochemicals, or some other chemical which comes from bacteria, like the bacteriochemicals. Nowadays, people are becoming aware of, probiotics, is for example. So these are non-essential food. Okay, but those who have taken, they already know. Ayurveda has already told us that you can take, a curd at certain time of the day only, not always. So we had this knowledge of fermented food and all these different aspects, but we have, forgotten under the influence of the Western styles. Now, how come that cause pathogenesis? So that definitely has a lot of biological response, and that's not at all a matter of debate. And these biological functions are having a physiological functions. Okay, and there are consequences. Okay, if these responses are not proper because our diet is not proper, and that can affect the pathology of the diseases, and that's how a disease appears in our body. Okay, now one of the most essential disease to be talked at here, which is related with our diet, is type 2 diabetes. And people will immediately bring it into our notice that it is because of the sugar. It's not only because of the high level of sugar. Yeah, high level of sugar in the blood is one of its phenotype. It's not only caused by consumption of high glucose. Okay, glucose may form in your body from several other nutrients also. Okay, so there is a triangle which can explain type 2 diabetes. So that is not only the food, okay? Food is of course there, but the effect which is brought about is by combination of the three things, is your genetics, your environment, and your behavior. Okay. Now, our generation, the new generation, what you say, which I will say is a computer geeks, right? You're always busy with a computer, mobile. So for them, if you see their pyramid, okay, so they, consume a lot of greasy and oily food, and then a lot of chemical food, chemical containing foods like colas and coffees and teas and all of that. Then they eat a lot of sugar and salt also along with these two. And the essential food, is in a very little amount in their diet, and that's a matter of the concern. Other important thing which is, to be considered is the environmental influence. Environment does influence us very, very strongly. Okay. And we will talk about it in a much more detail. Okay. So both genetic and environment plays their role together in the development of various diseases. Okay, so here we can see that what disease is caused by which kind of, and what is the involvement of the genetic and environmental factors. So if you see genetic factors which are absolutely genetic are really very rare, but the one which are with the, which is brought about by the environment are really very common. So what WHO has to say in this regard? Okay. So there is a one sentence which is being issued by WHO that those aspects of human health, including quality of life, that are determined by physical, chemical, biological, social, and psychosocial factors in the environment. It also refers to the theory and practice of assessing, correcting, controlling, and preventing those factors in the environment that can potentially affect adversely the health of present and the future generations. So that means the environment has a very great effect on our, health. Okay, which begins from home and goes to our neighborhood and then goes to the ambient environment. So there are a lot of different effects which comes to you at the end. Okay, so these all are considered as a proximal environmental influences. Okay, and there are global environmental influences are also like the climate change. There is a ozone depletion, there is a desertification and the land degradation. There's a reduction or there is a decline in the amount of fresh water. There is a loss of the biodiversity and the ecosystem function. So all of these, they have their effect on the human in a different ways. So this is again a diagram which WHO. So what about the burden of environmental diseases? A little old diagram, but it's quite efficiently efficiently make us understand that India is, you know, has a very high amount of burden of the environmental diseases. Okay? Particularly the region, like Delhi, okay, Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan, Punjab, they are having a very high burden of the environmental disease. This is taken from a very recent study published in the Lancet. So how we interact with our environment and what are the disease possibilities? So a lot of factors are there, like climate, which is an environmental hazard, urbanization, okay, poverty, which leads, and industrialization, and that all affect us and cause a lot of different diseases like cancer, diabetes, respiratory diseases, cardiovascular diseases, neuronal behavioral injuries, sensitivities, and lot. You will, earlier we never had a problem of allergy or asthma. But nowadays, if you go to any home and ask anybody is having asthma or allergy, you will find out that in every home there is a one guy who is having allergy to the environment. So what brings about all these different hazards which are related to the environment? So there are a lot of biological agents also like bacteria, protozoa, viruses, fungi, algae, mites, pollen, molds, so many. But these were there before also. Or rather you want to say, or you may want to say that these were in a more amount before than now. Then why these diseases have increased? So this is because we have become sensitive. We do not go to environment that often. So that's why we are very less exposed to these environmental or biological agents. Okay. And once we get the exposure, then we have a allergy. Then there are a lot of chemical contaminations. So many chemicals are there in our environment, which is released by various household and industrial purposes like fluorine, chlorine, bromine, PCBs, DDTs, and lot. Okay, organic and inorganic, both the types of. A lot of environmental radiation is there, like microwaves, UV rays, noise, which is generated from various different sources. And there is a lot of particulate material matters in our environment like dust, smoke, asbestos, ETS, so many. And they all affect. Maybe a lot of hypotheses are being put forth that the presence of all these things make us sensitive to this one. Okay, and that may be the reason that we are seeing is the increased allergy in our environment. And there are a lot of diseases which is already been explained. You must be aware of the Minamata disease, which happened in the Japan due to release of the mercury. Okay, there was a recent case of lead lead in the painting of the state of Michigan. Okay, and that has led to the reduction in the IQ. Okay, in the the child which used to stay in those houses which had this lead painting. In the Seveso, Italy, there was a report of the dioxin contamination. Lead and other heavy metals is been reported in various types of environment, and a lot of places are there. Smoke is a very big problem and leads to a lot of different effects on our body. And we are already very well aware of these problems in the Delhi. Okay, so Delhi, every winter we see this huge problem mounting up. Same way, it is also been reported in many other, cities, including some cities of Pakistan, which are very highly polluted. Same way it does reported in the China also. Heat stroke and increased mortality is experienced by a lot of elderly people. Lead paint, and we just saw it, indoor air quality is also gradually reducing. Smoke and cardiovascular problem has a direct, relationship, and is been proved in 2006. Particulate matter is also there in a very high amount. Okay, in various countries, particularly if you see India, there's a very huge amount of particulate, matter content. And I want to say here that Ahmedabad is also one of the city which has a very high amount of particulate material. This would always be worrying. Now let us go to the third part of our chapter, and that is about how does they bring about change in the our genetics. Okay. So before that, let us understand some basic aspect of genetics. I have a knowledge that you are aware of a lot of basic part, so I'll go very quickly. So we have our genetic material, that is DNA, which is located in the nucleus of our cells, and that expresses itself mainly in a form of mRNA, and then that mRNA forms a protein and that controls many of our functions. So the gene expression is regulated at various levels like transcription, RNA processing, mRNA transport, mRNA translation, mRNA degradation, and the protein degradation. So there are a lot of various ways, a gene regulation happen. Okay. So transcriptionally, it is, regulated at a promoter region. Okay, so there are a lot of different consensus sequences which binds to a particular type of transcription factors, which will ultimately bring about the recruitment of the RNA polymerase, and that's how the synthesis of the mRNA takes place. And this is probably the very, very important mechanism. So the attachment of the transcription factor. So you can see over here that this is a simple, diagram of one of the, transcription start site. Okay. And how it goes is the action of the RNA polymerase. So if you see, there are so many proteins are involved in doing it. So if one of the protein or activator or enhancer or silencer is not there, okay, that will hamper, action on the RNA polymerase, and that's why end up, synthesis of mRNA and then the synthesis of the protein also. So that's why this is one of the very important mechanism. So this actually regulate the gene expression, and because of this transcriptional regulation, our cells, are of various types, like the muscle cells are muscle cells, and the blood cells are blood cells, and the beta cells of islets of Langerhans is that kind of cell. So this is because of the gene expression regulation, which is actually primarily taking place at the transcription level. Another way of controlling is at the chromosome packing level, and that is mainly controlled by the acetylation of the. Okay, so these all are classified under the epigenetic regulation. So this taking place at the DNA level by the methylation of the cytosine, and at a level of histone by is various modifications like acetylation, methylation, phosphorylation, ubiquitination, and the third one is non-coding RNA. Okay, so histone modifications are quite very important. Okay, and they have is a certain type of messages. Okay, like acetylation, deacetylation, and methylation, demethylation, ubiquitination, and the deubiquitination. So these effects maybe depend on a particular circumstances and particular conditions. Okay, hypoacetylation basically causes a strong internucleosomal interactions, while the hyperacetylation will cause weak internucleosomal and interaction. Because of these weak ones, the histone tails do not constrain the DNA, and therefore it is accessible to transcription, and that's why a transcription and the expression of the gene takes place. Okay, so therefore acetylation has a function of neutralizing the positive charge on lysine residue, and therefore it destabilizes the interaction, and that's why transcription of a gene takes place. Non-coding RNA has is a this field is emerging field, and a lot of we are trying to understand that how non-coding RNA are related to our food. But one of the most important mechanism which I want to emphasize is the DNA methylation. Okay, so what happens that the cytosine is methylated at this position. Okay, so that is catalyzed by the enzymes which are called DNMT, and by using the products that is SAM is converted into SAH. So this will lead to methyl cytosine. Okay, and this CNG, okay, means the CNG, they are located more in the promoter region of the genes, particularly the basic promoter region. So when the methylation takes place, the transcription factors are not able to bind, okay, and that will reduce the expression of the genes. That will reduce the expression of the genes. So these are called the CPG islands, and they are mainly located in our promoter regions. So there are more than 20,000 CPG islands in our DNA. 60% of them are in the promoter region. So a lot of genes like tumor suppressor genes, cell cycle regulating genes, apoptosis genes, and DNA repair and damage genes, they are also all having a CPG island, and that's why they are able to regulate the expression of the gene. Now transcriptional repression. So how it does it? So when a methylation take place, so what will happen that there are proteins in our nucleus like HP1. So they will bind to it, and because of that, our chromatin becomes condensed, and that's why is unable to undergo the transcription. So this is regulated by the enzymes which is called methyl transferases, which is called de novo methyl transferase DNMTs, where we have a various types of DNMTs, and they are catalyzing the methylation of the cytosine. Now, why I'm teaching you is to explain you the effect of environment and food on methylation. So these methyl transferases, they have a besides DNA methylating region, they do have the other regions. Okay, and these other parts. These are the reasons so that we can attach them to that of the functions, or which is related with the nutrition, or which is related to the effect of the environment. Okay. Besides that, these transferases also interact with the various different proteins, and those proteins are again further associated with various other environment related and the diet related factors. Okay, so this is a very important field, and that 50% of our genome is already been silenced, and methylation is a very important in chromatin into heterochromatin. You are well aware of that the X chromosome inactivation is the standard case of the epigenetic regulated gene expression. So this epigenetics means these mechanisms like DNA methylation and acetylation and all others. So these all are very important mechanisms, So when a primordial germ cell forms on that time, there is no methylation of the DNA, but as the cell grows into sperm and egg, on that time the methylation takes place. Sperm has a more methylated DNA than the egg. Then the fertilization takes place, and then again demethylation takes place, and then a blastocyst forms. So you know this blastocyst. Okay, the cells of blastocysts and before that are pluripotent, and then after they get destination, and as they get the destination, the methylation increases. Okay, and this methylation is inherited also. Okay, it has been shown very conclusively, in the lot of sisters, twin sisters, homozygous twin sisters. So, you know, how do this is, achieved? We still do not, understand, and that has a role in, say, epigenetics and a lot of other, uh, aspects. Various diseases are shown to be associated with, epigenetic changes like cancer, complex disorders like type 2 diabetes, imprinting disorders also, and the neurodevelopmental disorders also. Among these two are also associated with the environment and the diet, and that's what I want to tell you. If they ask you, okay, so epigenetics recently, if you open PubMed, and if you go for finding out the reason for the development of any disease, they all will tell you is only one thing, that this is because of epigenetics. So you might also say that, yeah, so that's what the thing goes on. So now cancer, first of all. So a lot of genes are known to be associated with the epigenetic changes in the cancer, including a very important genes like RB, retinoblastoma, BRCA, E-cadherin, and those who are working in the field of chemistry, cancer biology, they are very, very well aware of the importance of these different genes. Okay. Now, how diet affects the epigenetic changes? Now, in this regard also, we have started understanding a very important experiment was performed in the 2002, where a hypomethylated yellow mouse, which has a very high risk cancer, diabetes, obesity, and a reduced lifespan, was supplied with certain chemicals like zinc, methionine, betaine, choline, folate, B12. They become hypermethylated. They got converted into agouti, which has a low risk of cancer, diabetes, obesity, and they have a very prolonged. That was the point. And then at present, everyone wants to focus their research on how diet affects our epigenetics. This is also important for the pharmacology, okay? Because epigenetics is reversible. So epigenetic drugs could be used to either activate or inactivate a particular gene. Okay. And a lot of known epigenetic drugs can have a, epigenetic effects, and a lot of drug repurposing studies are going on in this direction. Okay, so it's a very important field which is called pharmacoepigenomics. So what is the amount? Okay, so this is a really a big question, but people are trying to understand it, that how can it happen and how can it affect. Okay, so yeah, there are, everything should be in a proper amount. That what we understand. If you take it in a more amount, then it can be toxic also. Okay, So components are in fact a complex mixtures and they act synergistically. So what is problem in the lab? That in the lab we isolate, we can perform, if you want to say definitely about a one particular component, then you have to do it, with a pure form. Okay, that but the problem of the pure form that you cannot interpret it, when it is taken in a complex form. Okay, so that's what this cartoon says to us, that this tomato soup combined with our chicken noodle soup can form a little nerve. Okay, and then also, epigenetics can have diet also and the environment also can have a different effects on different types of people. So that's why one size does not fit all. Okay, so that's why there is a lot of therapeutic dilemma, and those people who are working particularly in the field of the nutrition, they are very well aware of that. There are, if you recommend a particular nutrition to a one person and if you compare it with the other person, then there are differences, and these differences are because of their genetics and epigenomics, but we are still not understanding. And what I want to say, that when I know all of our life's answers, they change my questions. So technology is there at our, help, and several new studies have come which have tried to, pinpoint a particular effect of a particular nutrient or the environmental factor. Okay, so it's very good cartoon. It would never work, Nicole. I am in the experimental group and you are in the control group. Okay, so I must have make you yawning. Okay, so we are at the end of our lecture. So let me tell you Evo, Eco, and the Vivo of our lecture. So there are various epigenetic mechanisms that control our promoter activity, and these mechanisms are affected by both environment and the diet. Okay, and these can be involved in various diseases like diabetes and the cancer. Okay, so there are a lot of research is coming out, and they can alter the DNA. Methylation means epigenetic changes in the our DNA, and that's why it can cause a particular effect of diet or the environmental factor. Okay, so that would be good to go. And the researchers, there's a big, all these fields are very big. Nutrition is one field, environment is another field, and genomics is the another field. So that's why there needs to develop a partnership in understanding effect of various factors and various components. One of the best example is iodine deficiency. So improving beneficial component of diet does not increase the iodine intake. Okay, and the dietary diversification does not increase iodine intakes, because iodine deficiency is a disease of the soil. It is not the disease of the iodine. Okay, and because of the government made a policy that iodine must be included, and a lot of people are having now hyper, you know they have a more level of the thyroxine in their body. So I want to say that with this, I want to repeat this sentence of Mahatma Gandhi, that I would be hard-hearted enough to let this, sick die if you can tell me how to prevent others from falling sick. And the journey, the only exercise some people get is jumping to conclusion, running down their friends, sidestepping responsibility and pushing their luck. So let's don't do it. Rather than that, let us, what Mahatma Gandhi said, cases, then let us, try to explore it and try to get the answer. Otherwise, life is very beautiful and enjoy it. Thank you very much.